Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm recording a podcast episode at the moment on the PrEP framework, PREP, which some of you might be familiar with. It's quite popular in management and leadership courses on communication. The idea is that we structure our message with these 4 different sections. First, we talk about the point, like what's the overall response to the question that we've been asked, or what's the thing that we want to say to the other person specifically. Then we talk about a reason. This is how come it's important. This is why I think that this behavior should stop or this should begin, etc. Then we give an example. Oops, put 2 E's there. An example. So we could say something like, for example, last week this thing happened and it was an issue for this reason or something else. But we finish by coming back to the point. When we think about human memory, one of the effects that's quite obvious is the peak end principle. We tend to remember the peak, the best or the worst that an experience was. When you think back to a previous job that you had, for example, you probably remember the very bad days or the really good days and the really lovely moments. And we often remember the end. You might remember the farewell or the team that you ended up with at the final stages of where you were working, etc. So when we structure our communication by putting the point at the beginning and the end, like here and here, it effectively reinforces it, which means that it's going to have more prevalence in the person's memory and attention, and therefore likely more buy-in as a result for what you're asking them to do. So I have already prepared a few different case studies. You can see the first one on the screen here with Sarah. So I thought that I could use these each as examples where I'm using the PrEP framework to respond really off the cuff. Like I haven't rehearsed this. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to write for any of the different ones. I'm showing the way that I approach conflict situations myself, and then you might be able to apply the same principles in the context that you're working in. So let's look at this first case study on the screen here. We've got Sarah. I'm a high school teacher in Sydney. I'm in a proper blue with our new principal, Mr. Ramirez, over his push for bloody tablets in work. By the way, I asked Grok to prepare these case studies, and I thought it might be funny to do a really Australian ochre accent, so you might notice a few little Australianisms in the phrasing, etc. The bloody tablets in class. I've been teaching English my way for 15 years, but he shot down my worries about the kids with no tech in a staff meeting. So he has responded to her concerns in public. Therefore, I'm guessing it's likely that she felt a bit embarrassed and maybe even like this was a tactic to undermine her authority or something similar. I felt totally gutted and kept my old lesson plans, so she felt very upset but decided not to change even though she was instructed to, which stuffed the curriculum up, roll out and split the staff. I'm still spewing and we're barely yarning. It's a shambles and the kids are copying it. How do I sort out this mess? Well, this, I think, is quite a good example because it's a situation where there's probably multiple things that Sarah would want to say to this principal. There's probably quite a few bits in the way that he's communicated which have caused her distress, but for me at least, I would suggest that she starts by prioritizing. Like, what's the immediate thing that you're wanting Mr. Ramirez to do? What's the immediate steps that are needed to resolve this issue kind of thing? And for me, it's probably Sarah requesting a meeting. Like, could we organize a time to talk it through and get on the same page? I think there's probably a few different types of conflict going on here. We've got data conflict, which maybe he gave instructions and she didn't understand, or he might have felt like she had communicated buy-in when actually she said that she would think about it or give it some consideration or something similar. But there might be interest factors that are at play here. Like maybe Sarah's concerned about the amount of extra work that's needed for this additional change. Maybe Mr. Ramirez is trying to look good for the school board, or his probation's coming up, or maybe he's short-staffed at the moment and he doesn't want to lose good staff. Like Sarah could choose to negotiate around those aspects as well. Like, I'd be happy to go with the changes that you're requesting if you can do this by response. It's kind of like, if you do this, then I'm willing to come to the party. But I think initially Sarah's probably best strategy is to set up a time to discuss it. This would be my approach. Obviously, we're all going to have a slightly different style and different idea about what's a normal way of communicating about these kind of things. But that's probably what I'll do. So let's think about the point. Maybe Sarah could say something like, look, would it be possible for us to organize a time to discuss the recent changes? And she might even say something like, it seems like we've got different perspectives on where things are up to, and it would be good to get on the same page moving forward. So the point would be something like, could we please meet? Would you consider organizing a time to discuss it in person? And she would need to decide how to do that. Does she want it to be a one-on-one? Maybe she prefers it to be readdressed in the staff meeting, given the fact that that's where it was discussed previously. So could we organize a time to discuss? Oops, daisy. And she probably wants to find a way of describing the issue in a mutual and neutral kind of way. So maybe the changes to the curriculum, or could we organize a time to discuss incorporating technology in class for the students? I wouldn't say, could we organize a time to discuss these absurd rollouts that have been so poorly communicated that everything is in a massive shambles? Like, the message here shouldn't be you're wrong and I'm right. It should be, let's figure out a time to calibrate and get on the same page moving forward. She could talk about a reason, like at this stage, there's a lack of clarity about how we're going to be approaching the extracurricular activities next week. So maybe she could talk about an example of an upcoming decision that needs to be made or something similar. Next week, this is an issue that's going on. That's why I'm wanting to organize a time to discuss it with you. And then maybe even a specific example. If we don't make this decision by this date, then we're likely to lose a deposit for the dance hall that we're renting for this event that's coming up. If we're not able to do this, then I don't need how to communicate to my junior teachers in my team meeting next week. So maybe talk about an upcoming example of if we're not able to meet, how this might cause an issue, or one of the specific things that you'd like to discuss. And then finally, we're coming back to this request again. So please let me know what's a good time. I'm available on these 3 dates. If any of those happen to work, let me know what works for you. So it's organizing, coming back to that idea of like, please let me know what's going to work for you, something similar. I like to have some type of a specific request. Would you let me know if that's something you're prepared to do? Or could you outline a few options where you're available and I'll organize things around it and hopefully I can make something work. But what I'm wanting you to do is send me dates, or what I'm wanting you to do is to agree to meet, or what I'm wanting you to do is to send me through the agenda items for next week. Like, specifically, what's the thing that we want? We don't want to end by saying something like, I hope you'll take this matter more seriously. Well, what do we actually expect them to do there? That type of labeling tends to be interpreted as vague criticism, and what it often elicits is vague defensiveness in my experience. So I think that point, reason, example could be quite helpful for Sarah in that kind of a situation. But let's look at the next case study and maybe we can see how it would be applied in a different kind of context. This is the first time that I'm doing the videos in this format, by the way, so please let me know how you find it. If it's useful, I'd be incredibly grateful if you would consider leaving a positive review or pressing like or subscribe or whatever the different things are that you can use to trigger to the algorithm that this might be something that other people finds helpful. So the next case study, we're looking at a different situation. We're looking at a hospital. G'day, I'm Emily, a nurse supervisor in Adelaide. A new doctor, Dr. Patel, a new doc, changed ward routines without a word, and I had a crack at him during a flat-out shift. So to interpret the Australian colloquialisms there, he has changed the routines without letting her know, and so she has, I think, probably tried to raise it with him. I had a crack at him probably means that she might have come across as a bit aggressive in that situation, and it was during a really busy shift. So even there, you would have to begin to think, well, I'm not sure that this was probably the ideal setting for this kind of a situation to happen. I talked about those types of conflict in the previous case study, the data conflict, where we've got different interpretations around expectations and agreement, or interest conflict, what's in it for me and what's in it for you. Another of those 5 types of conflict is structural conflict. And it just in this situation, it would be very, very, very unlikely that that conversation during a really busy time in the shift is going to be the ideal situation to raise it. And she says immediately, I felt like a right galah. It's caused delays, stressing everyone out. Patients are copying the fallout and we're still having a blue. So there's still tension and arguments going on from the sounds of it. And patients are copying the fallout. If I were meeting Emily for a mediation, I'd be really curious to know what's the fallout specifically that they're copying. Is it delays? Is it some complication in decision making? Is it that they don't have access to the same resources or special staff, or what's going on? Like, specifically, what's the consequence that they're copying, and what needs to be different to reduce that? I think that would be the situation where we're using prep. For Emily, it would be, what specifically do you want Dr. Patel to do now? So we don't want to just go back to the past of, you should have done this differently, that was really unsupportive, that was careless, that was reckless. But we do want to say something like, this is the current situation, this is the context that the team are in, this is how this is impacting on them, this is what they need moving forward. So that final thing that Emily says there, how do I fix this and get us working together, mate? Well, I think it's probably about short term and then medium term and then long term solutions to this kind of one. In the longer term, I suppose we could think about things like how these decisions are made in an executive team or within a leadership structure or something similar. So it's possible that Emily could say something like, I'd like to talk about how these decisions are made. So how decisions are made regarding X. So she could say something like, I would like you to discuss me before making these decisions. She could say something like, could we organize a time to talk about the best structure to use for these kind of things? So she's looking at more of a systemic review and structural change potentially. Or she could say something like, given the fact that this is the current situation, could we do this moving forward? Like, she could say something like, I'm happy to discuss those changes that you've asked the staff to consider. Right now, though, is not the best time to do it. Could we leave things as they were previously, and we can discuss incorporating those change more strategically when we meet next week? So maybe her point is saying something like, could we roll back the changes temporarily? She probably, again, doesn't want to communicate in a way that insinuates criticism or that Dr. Patel was stupid or unethical or inconsiderate or something with the way that he acted. Give him the benefit of the doubt. It's possible that he was just busy, or it's possible that this is the way that communication happened in the last hospital that he worked or something similar. So can we please roll back the changes temporarily? The reason is that currently there's a lack of consistency with the way that the nurses are administering medication or something similar. For example, this thing happened on the shift last night. So there's current confusion is probably the reason that she wants to talk about, or a lack of consistency, or delays that are happening, or I don't know, whatever the specific impacts are that's going on for the patients. That's where we would want to include that. Like, what's the problem? And then the example would be, pick one recent example. And this hopefully isn't a situation where it's like, you should have seen this coming. Hopefully this is a situation like, look, it's normal that we weren't able to factor in all of the possible issues that we would have to deal with. This is one that probably was a little bit unexpected. Given that, though, this is what I think would be helpful moving forward. So if the rolling back of the changes is the thing that she would want to do, then we would finish by reinforcing that again. And we want to be quite specific about that request. How long do you want to roll back the changes for? Are there specific changes that you're wanting to roll back and others are okay to keep in place? What would be that process to review or consider whether or not you adapt it and incorporate them permanently or keep things as they were more permanently previously? It's like, what's the review process going to look like? Is that a meeting? Who's going to be there? What's the level of communication that will happen with the other team members? All of those kind of things. So at least at the surface level, it's like, let's organize a time to meet and talk it through. Or could we organize this structure? I think this would work. What do you think? So that's where we add our perspective, our point, and then we might even just throw the ball back in their court by saying, let me know your thoughts, or maybe we could talk about this when we meet tomorrow morning, or I'm free this afternoon. If you'd like to talk it through in person, that might be helpful. Just let me know. Maybe we could go and grab a coffee from the cafe across the road or something. Like, I'm lowering the stakes, I'm lowering that level of tension, and as much as possible, shifting the focus to the future and the solutions. So maybe let's look at one more case study example, not a hospital. I'll have a look at what the other options are that we've got. Just finish erasing all of my little notes that are here. I'll flick back to the PDF. So we've got Maria, a safety inspector on a Melbourne building site. She says her foreman, Jack, is dead set on deadlines, even dodging safety checks. So that's probably one of the specific things that Maria could refer to. These safety checks can't be skipped. I spotted a shonky rebar and stopped work for an audit, holding up a big concrete pour. So something's happened in terms of the reinforcement there, and she's held up a pretty significant stage. Anytime you've got equipment coming in like concrete trucks or cranes or that kind of thing, my goodness, these costs can add up really quickly on construction sites. Jack lost it, saying that I'm costing a mozza. I'm filthy. He doesn't give a rat's about safety. So this is a different kind of conflict actually that's going on here. I think I'd call this value conflict. He doesn't give a stuff about safety. That's probably not true. He's got a different set of values that he's working with. It might be that we're living in too much of a nanny state and, you know, there's too much of this breathing down our necks and audits and that kind of stuff. So he thinks that it isn't needed. But that's possibly not true at all. It might be that he really does care about safety, but he's balancing it in amidst other priorities like costs, for example, or he doesn't want to inconvenience the contractors that he's using because he needs to keep them happy because he's going to need them on the next job that he's working on or something like that. So she says the crew is split, mistakes are stacking up, and we're still at each other's throats. It's a bloody mess. It's a bloody tense mess. And I'm stressing about accidents. What's the go to fix this? Well, again, it's probably the short-term request of let's organise a time to talk it through. But I think it might even be worth Maria using the PrEP framework just to talk about the importance of not skipping the safety checks. So she could use it in these two different directions. One would be, let's organise a time to meet. The reason would be, it seems like we've got different perspectives around how these safety checks should be managed, or it sounds like maybe you're feeling like I overstepped the mark by shutting down the concrete pour last week or something similar. It's like saying, obviously there's this issue between us, like let's name the elephant in the room. It sounds like you're unhappy about that decision that I made. Let's organise a time to talk it through so that this doesn't happen moving forward. So I'd probably be starting just with the point of, could we please meet? But maybe let's think about the other thing that Maria could request, which would be stop skipping safety checks. And this might probably be something that Maria would be best to go and talk to him about first, but you could probably consider putting it in an email if that's something that's too confronting. So the point there would be something like, these audits or these safety checks or this bit of PPE equipment or whatever is not negotiable. The audits are not negotiable. She might say something like, I appreciate the challenges of the delays given the fact that this happened last week. At the same time, if an inspector comes and we're not up to scratch in terms of the paperwork or the checklists or whatever, we could be in breach of the safety guidelines and potentially liable for X amount of dollars. So she's kind of saying, you can't skip these. Not just they're very important. It's like, this must happen. And the reason is our obligations under the legislation, or the reason is the potential for getting an inspector coming. Or we could just say the reason is that if a staff member gets hurt, that we would be liable, and the medical costs for this kind of thing might be exponential, especially if somebody's permanently injured or even loses their life. So the reason would be something like reinforcing their obligations or reinforcing the safety policy or something similar. You can't skip it. The reason is because of the law. It's illegal, or it's part of something that we must do. One example could be this. I know that decision last week led to this delay. I'm happy to consider other options where that works. What I need, though, is clear communication from yourself around how you're managing this and this and this and this. So we would finish by coming back to the point. Again, they cannot be skipped. If there's a specific issue, if something that needs to happen, please let me know and we can talk through other options rather than just, we don't probably want to use inflammatory language like going behind my backs, but you might say something like, keep me in the loop, and that'll mean that we can avoid these potential delays moving forward. So you must not skip these delays. And if this is the kind of thing that the foreman is doing again and again, and it actually is serious, I think that Maria might even consider using an ultimatum here. when I do conflict resolution training, I often talk about a gradually escalating level of assertiveness. Like at the beginning of an issue, we can just talk things through in a very mutual and amicable kind of way. But if this is the third time that this has happened on site and it is actually a really significant issue, then maybe Maria needs to say, this is your last chance. This is the final straw. This is like the most assertive level of communication that we could use. And I like doing ultimatums as a choice. It's this or this, but what we want to do is typically put the negative option first and the positive option second. So here we might say something like, if the safety checks are skipped again, I'm going to notify one of the directors, or I'm going to issue you with a formal warning. Or if these safety checks are skipped again, the entire site will be put on hold until I can ensure that everything is up to scratch. So it might be like, if you don't do the right thing, this is actually the negative consequence that you're going to experience. So this is the negative option, and this is the consequence if you do that. Or this is where we put what we want them to do. Or if you can make sure that the checklists are done as needed, then you don't need to worry about any additional delays on the job site. In fact, I'm willing to work with you to change the systems so that they're more efficient and don't take as much of your time. We want to put the positive option, like stop skipping the checks, last. And what's the positive consequence for them? It might just be avoiding the negative consequences of the other, or maybe there's some little carrot that you can dangle in front of them, like you'll change the way that it works so that it's not going to take as much of their time as something similar. Well, it's a really good exercise for me going through this and doing it live. It's probably quite useful for the podcast episode that I'm going to do. I'm going to use some of those examples that I've just discussed. But what do you think? How does that prep framework resonate with you? Is it something that you already use or something that you could consider? I'd love to know. But thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you'd like additional tools for dealing with conflict and communication in this kind of thing. And otherwise, all the best.